Restless Yellowstone caldera is truly living, breathing, and every once in a while it burps.
In two of the really large eruptions at Yellowstone, so much material comes out, a lot of things can happen that we're not really ready for.
Yellowstone National Park remains a wild and occasionally frightening area. While Yellowstone is a sight to see, there are some disturbing aspects to the national park. The detection of a significant sudden uplift is a clear indication of a global devastation on the way. While the sleeping giant occasionally stirs, this uplift is unprecedented in scientific history. As this realization dawned on scientists and the entire country, another realization began to emerge. Nobody knew what to expect if this volcano erupted. This volcano has begun to rise at the highest rate ever observed in the recent decade. Speculations that the volcano will only erupt in the next 100,000 years are beginning to fade, and experts who previously believed Yellowstone was a dormant volcano are beginning to rethink. Everyone has started to prepare for the possibility of this volcano suddenly erupting. One can only imagine the carnage that will follow if this volcano erupts. Will the volcano erupt as a result of the recent uplift? Have the officials made the correct decision by closing the park? Join us as we investigate why Yellowstone officials recently closed the park and stated that the volcanic uplift is intensifying. Yellowstone National Park is not your normal park with lush green grass and lovely stone park benches. In fact, it's the complete opposite. Yellowstone National Park, founded in 1872, is usually regarded as the world's first national park. The activity of this volcano has been closely and continuously studied since 1923. But in recent times, magma activity has caused the ground to swell and rise by up to 25 centimeters, or about 10 inches. The increase began to level out, indicating that the magma was cooling and hardening. This was an early hint to scientists who have been monitoring the activity of this sleeping monster that it may be ready to awaken. Scientists have resorted to examining the last 3 known eruptions to try to predict what to expect from a potential Yellowstone eruption. All 3 eruption occurrences were massive in scale. The evidence of the most recent one, which occurred over 600,000 years ago, can still be seen over the vast expanse of land that is Yellowstone National Park. The Huckleberry Ridge eruption was the first one to happen, and it happened roughly 2.1 million years ago. Over 580 cubic miles of volcanic ash, gases, magma, and other substances were ejected. This eruption is now officially recognized as the largest one ever recorded in the history of Yellowstone National Park and all of North America. MESA Falls was the second known Yellowstone eruption, occurring 1.3 million years ago and creating Henry's Fort caldera, which is located west of Yellowstone. This eruption, the smallest of the 3 Yellowstone eruptions, generated just 67 cubic miles of volcanic material. The most recent known Yellowstone eruption is the Lava Creek eruption, the 3rd major Yellowstone eruption. The amount of material expelled was less than half of what was erupted during the Huckleberry Ridge eruption, but it covered a large surface area. Along with the magma and other volcanic debris, a large volume of volcanic ash and gas was thrown out with enormous power. Unfortunately, the destructive impacts of this monster were not restricted to the limits of Yellowstone National Park. What's more, the magma and volcanic debris engulfed the majority of the continental United States. In fact, some of the debris from this eruption has been discovered as far away as Louisiana, which is thousands of miles distant from Wyoming. Following these destructive eruptions, the Yellowstone volcano sucked in forests, mountains, and anything else that it could before collapsing in on itself and forming a depression that still remains today. The Yellowstone caldera is the name given to this depression. The closest similar recent volcanic eruption is the notorious Mount St. Helens volcanic eruption in 1980. This eruption claimed the lives of 56 humans and countless of animals, as well as destroying hundreds of square kilometers of land in Washington and Oregon. While the St. Helens eruption is a decent comparison, it pales in contrast to the last Yellowstone supervolcano eruption, which is believed to have been 1,000 times more powerful than the St. Helens outburst. Because of all the hot ash, molten rock, and lethal gases that were thrown up thousands of meters into the stratosphere, the last Yellowstone eruption must have completely covered a big portion of the continent. The magma and fumes rushed with breakneck speed throughout the whole landscape, leaving nothing in their path. Everything was burnt and the landscape was blanketed with ash. The Yellowstone caldera has some of the most significant evidence of the last eruption. This depression is 30 miles wide and 45 miles long, and heavy volcanic debris from the eruption can still be seen in an area known as the Lava Creek Tuff. While everyone hopes for the best, the geological data cannot be disregarded. A massive volcanic eruption on the scale of the one that occurred over 600,000 years ago is not something that anyone, much alone any country, can adequately prepare for. It will be a catastrophic event. So while experts do not rule out the prospect of an eruption, they are praying for the best. A minor volcanic event, such as hydrothermal explosions, which are steam and hot water eruptions rather than molten rock or lava flows. Lava flows are volcanic phenomena in which lava gently oozes out of cracks and runs over the ground for several days, months, or years. They are likewise a type of magmatic eruption, although not nearly as catastrophic as a full-fledged caldera-forming eruption. They are also infrequent occurrences, but far preferable than a full-fledged eruption. A lava flow from the Yellowstone caldera happened around 70,000 years ago. However, there were perhaps 30 additional lava flows following the full-scale eruption that occurred over 600,000 years ago. Even though it has been 70,000 years since the last lava flow, hikers along Yellowstone trails can view signs of this volcanic event, such as rock layers and certain lava strata that can be plainly seen in the Grand Canyon of Yellowstone. Meanwhile, officials at Yellowstone have discovered a massive chunk of magma that has been pulsing, and experts are unsure if it is reasonable to expect small volcanic occurrences such as hydrothermal bursts or lava flows. The underlying activity has reached a level that has fueled debate about when the volcano would erupt and how powerful it will be. In recent years, the frequency of earthquakes in the Yellowstone region has grown. Every year, Yellowstone experiences between 1,000 and 3,000 earthquakes. Some of these earthquakes are little tremors that go unreported. Scientists can quantify the degree of activity in the magma pool below using some of the finest equipment for detecting and monitoring earthquakes. A reservoir can be found barely beneath the surface and rather near to the ground in Yellowstone National Park, which is home to a magma lake that lies below the surface. This reservoir is known as the magma chamber. The tremors, whether felt or not, provide scientists with information on how quickly the magma chamber is filling up. As the strength and frequency of earthquakes rise across the park, it may be an indicator that a new batch of magma is being injected into the magma chamber. It's difficult to say with certainty what these quakes signify for Yellowstone National Park. Nobody can predict what Yellowstone will do next. Apart from the conclusions that may be drawn from researching the Yellowstone volcano's distant destructive past, not much else can be said. Because of how long ago the eruptions occurred, data from prior volcanic eruptions of the Yellowstone supervolcano cannot be depended on to properly foretell what the volcano will do next. The gigantic dome-shaped uplift is continually growing in size according to the Yellowstone National Park System Alert. This is undeniable evidence of increased volcanic activity under Yellowstone National Park's ground. As the volcanic uplift continues, Yellowstone officials have been forced to close the park, rendering it inaccessible to visitors and even certain researchers. This mini lockdown was put in place for people's protection in the event of a volcanic eruption, which appears to be closer now than it has been in the past 600,000 years. It is extremely likely that in order to appropriately protect the human population, Yellowstone National Park authorities and the federal government have to do much more than close the park if a full-fledged volcanic eruption occurs. To preserve human lives and property against volcanic eruptions like the one that occurred 600,000 years ago, whole cities must be evacuated. While an evacuation of this size has never occurred before, in the case of a volcanic catastrophe, residents in adjacent towns and even states may be forced to relocate far from the park. However, there is no guarantee that this will be effective. A major volcanic explosion of the size capable of Yellowstone will be so deadly that very few, if any, states on the United States continent will be spared. Visitors to Yellowstone's National Park, on the other hand, are strongly cautioned, due to the hazardous status of the water bodies, to always walk on boardwalks and established pathways and not to touch any of the hydrothermal features. Aside from being incredibly hot and acidic, the surface water bodies in Yellowstone are also pretty strange. it appears that not all living organisms are harmed when they enter hot springs, mud pools, or geysers. In fact, certain creatures thrive in the acid's heat. An amazing variety of microorganisms known as thermophiles have found a very welcoming home within Yellowstone National Park's hydrothermal features. Trillions of these species flourish in the conditions offered by these bodies of water. Although they are too tiny to be seen with the human eye, they aggregate and produce a coating of colour on the water bodies they inhabit. This is what gives the park's water bodies their gorgeous colours. Furthermore, the Yellowstone trees are prone to forest fires, which occur every year throughout the national park. In 1988, forest fires raged so enormous that about 1/3 of the park was destroyed. In the instant the roaring magma monster chooses to break through the ground of Yellowstone National Park and make an appearance, absolutely nothing in its path will be spared. This is why Yellowstone National Park officials close the park whenever there is even the tiniest indication of an approaching eruption of the Yellowstone supervolcano. So what can be done if Yellowstone erupts? The last Yellowstone eruption over 600,000 years ago released so much ash and various gases into the atmosphere that it most likely significantly affected global weather. It also most likely caused the extinction of a whole species, particularly those found only in America. Because of the direct and indirect repercussions of an eruption, as well as the enormity of the Yellowstone supervolcano, worldwide civilizations are likely to be wiped out. The entire planet will be devastated, and surviving civilizations will have to recover from the long-term impacts of the volcanic eruption's ash and hazardous substances discharged into the atmosphere. Unfortunately, except from evacuating the entire continent, there isn't much that can be done to avoid the devastating impacts of a Yellowstone eruption. Let us know what you think in the comments section below.